Yeah, so welcome to Wood, Air, and Metal podcast number one,
Yeah, guitar podcast.
Guitar Podcast. I'm Adam Keeler. I'm a classical guitarist. I've been playing for 30 years, mostly the last 12, 13, all strict classical. Met Tim in school. He was doing the jazz and classical thing because he's clearly a madman. And yeah, that's
And
about
I
it.
quickly found out that I couldn't do both.
You're just not a freak, that's all.
Yeah,
You
I
gotta
guess
get
so.
crazier.
Yeah, and other stuff. Yeah. So I'm Tim Mirth. I am, I guess, primarily some kind of jazz guitarist. Like Adam said, I met him back in the day. It's probably been like 15 years now, I think. And
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. We chat all the time, and it's always about guitar stuff. We're just sending guitar stuff to each other. So I was just like, why don't we just do a podcast about what we talk about all the time?
It's like if we need to, we can refer to our conversations to pick up the topics
Yeah,
because we've
it's
constantly.
really like a daily occurrence where he'll send me something and I send him something, and it can be anything from like a new like guitar effect or something, or some video of some great guitar players, or it's been like an endless thing. So
Yeah, and just waxing poetic about like how things have changed from when we started playing guitar to the way that they are now with the
yeah,
social media
there's
and
there's
that.
a lot of complaining.
Yeah, no kidding. Shit ton of complaining. Oh, I just moved us out of the PG rating. So,
Sorry.
uh,
So
but yeah,
we'll probably stumble all over this thing, and you'll have to bear with us. We're
yeah,
learning a bit about how to do this. I did have another podcast that I was doing for a while. So I have like this much knowledge. We didn't do video though, so this is kind of a new thing. And so I think we're gonna try to do like some YouTube stuff, and then get it out to every podcast thing once we figure out how to do it all.
yep, yep. That's the point, at least in theory.
Yeah.
We'll see how that all goes. But the thing that's interesting is that everything that we talk about is it's for me living in so much of a classical world, which I'm a professor of guitar at a college in Ohio. I'll keep it blank just for whatever reason. Um, and I generally live in a classical world, but I'm always getting exposed to electric guitar players and the fingerstyle guys, and I mean the occasional classical guy will come up, but it's kind of interesting because I practice mostly strict classical as I sit here with my electric in my hand, just just to prove the total contradiction of terms here. Uh, and like this, it's I'm always drawn between two worlds, but I absolutely love playing classical music as like the prime thing. If I'm going to sit down and play, that'll be it. Grab the nylon string and everything. I just did my nails again on Sunday and getting a pretty good tone out of it. My A finger's driving me a little bit batty, but I think I just gotta reshape it. And then lately, I've been on this kick of throwing in electric guitar practice on top of it, just to see if I can get chops back. I mean, in one sense, the whole Instagram feed thing is kind of inspiring. It's like, oh, I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can do that.
Yeah.
And it is to an extent, it's you can't serve two masters to an extent. You got that guy Anton Boyer, who's just a freak, like because I've seen him play Scarlatti and hard Scarlatti, and I'm like, that's pretty impressive. And then he'll do his jazz stuff, and it's like brilliant. And I'm like, all right, so you got guys like that
Sure.
prove me wrong, but at the same time, it's really cool to see the level of, just to kind of dive into one of the topics, is like the level of talent that is going on right now is just, I think it's insane. It's exciting, but it's always one of those questions like what we were talking about. Is it a question of, was it always this way and there was just no social media or an outlet for all these guys to kind of get a
Oh yeah.
platform? Or is it the exposure via social media in terms of access to tools of learning, like with YouTube and well, mainly YouTube in terms of instructional videos, access to that allow these guys to just kind of like jump into it hardcore. Whereas before, when we were kids growing up and trying to play guitar, it would be like, all right, I got to go to my local music shop or record store
Right.
and find tab books to get the music, and try to do some stuff by ear. Um, I used to drive my parents nuts when a new Satriani album would come out, and I'd go down with the CD and turn it on and turn on the amps and just try and figure out what the guy was
Oh yeah.
doing.
Yeah. I wonder. It's we've kind of talked about this too, but you know, there's this major increase in some things, but there's like something else that's sort of missing maybe. Like right now, like you were just saying before, you would just grab a CD, or I remember taking like cassette tapes and I would listen to the radio and record stuff, and then I would try to figure it out later. And I remember it was like late at night they would play certain types of music
Yep.
on the classic rock station. So I get all these, and at the time I was like only 10 or 11, and I had no idea what anything was. And you'd either be like Led Zeppelin or whatever, and I really remember the first time hearing like Good Time, Bad Times, and like it's a very vivid memory actually hearing that song. And I'd already started playing, but then I had to like kind of like absorb it and try to like kind of figure it out. And I wasn't getting lessons or whatever, and the only book I had was like some Mel Bake book or something. So you had to like really learn things on your own a little bit. And I guess in some ways it's slower that way, but you learn a certain set of skills by doing that. And I'm not sure if they're there now or not, but I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it becomes a matter of like if the person wants to, I don't want to necessarily say take a shortcut, but there's definitely things that with the Guitar Pro being one of those things, because I'm actually using now for like the first time ever, it shows up, it plays it for you. You can see the
Yeah.
tablature, you can see the music. I mean, that's a huge help. And I think that I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, like you're losing the ear training because you're kind of getting a lot of visual input at the same time, and the oral. I mean, if you're off, you're off. Like you really hear it, so it helps with
Right.
that regard. And it's embarrassing with some of the stuff I've been off with like guitar. It's like, really, I just can't hit that. Come on, what the hell?
Sure.
I can play Bach, but I just can't do this one sweep or whatever.
Yeah, that does
Stupid.
remind. I mean, when we started, the Tab like magazine thing was kicking off, right? So you
Mhm.
could. That was kind of it too. You'd have like a subscription to Guitar Magazine,
Yep.
and you'd get the 6 songs or whatever that week,
Yeah.
and may or that month or whatever, and maybe one of them was the one that you kind of knew, and you would sort of try to figure it out.
Yep.
And it was kind of interesting because there wasn't a lot of good books then, I don't think either, or at least that I had, because you'd
Yes.
had like the Mel Bay books with everything was in first position,
Yep.
and then you'd have like trying to learn a Randy Rhoads solo or something, and everything's up here. And in some ways, you think, well, like tab kind of stinks because you need to learn music, but like when you're a kid and you're only like 12 years old and you're trying to figure out Randy Rhoads, like
Yeah.
it's pretty helpful to know that like you can play an E here or whatever instead of just you know open string or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And I always used to get disappointed with those magazines sometimes. It'd be like, these poppy type hits that I didn't really want to. It's like, yeah, give me the
Yeah.
next Eric Johnson tune, or give me this, Steve Vai. Wow.
Oh my
Steve
gosh.
Vai. I was going to say
Classical
Ingve.
guitarists, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, everybody starts doing their own thing. I think I heard a rumor of this one guy, some guy, I can't remember his name, was in the master class that Steve brought in, our mutual teacher at the time. And he was talking about like he was one of Jason Vio's first instructors. And he's like, this kid would come in every week figuring out a Villa-Lobos etude by ear, which is like clearly that's a level that's way, way up there.
Sure.
And Jason's only a couple of years older than me.
Yeah, we talked about that a few months ago. I was so at some point I'd sort of studied some classical, but like you were talking about the nails, like maintaining the nails, but I was also doing like tapping stuff and like trying to do just too much. And at some point it was just too much to try to manage it all and give it any good attention. So it's kind of like that master of all trades, he's master of none kind of thing.
Yeah,
But
Jack of all
I
trades,
think like one day when my kids are a little older, like I might try to tackle like a classical recital or an album or something. And I think I was saying to you like I would like to learn it all by ear. So
Mhm.
like instead of because that's something like in the jazz world we always learn stuff by ear all the time. Like it's kind of this part of being in that world at all is learning stuff by ear. And then you're bouncing ideas off of people like so live. I always tell people I'm stealing their licks because I'll hear them play it and then I can mostly play it back to them. So like the thought of learning like a Villa-Lobos thing and like maybe taking some like cool violin pieces or cello pieces or piano pieces and just trying to figure them out by ear and then figure out my own way to play them seems like a much more honest way for me to approach classical guitar. I'm kind of interested too, like what if anyone actually listened, if the classical guitar community would appreciate that, or if they would see that as a negative or not. It's kind of an interesting thought.
As somebody in the classical guitar community, I'll come down out of my ivory tower for a moment. No, you know, it's an interesting thing because there's this mystique around the classical world that is very haughty-taughty, and to some extent it is. Like formal recitals are like that. You go to a formal recital, it's like you get your program. You know, there's next to no audience interaction. They come out, go through the program, and everybody claps at the particular times. And I get the place for that. I mean, it's in one sense, it is extraordinarily, if it's a high level concert or a high level player, it's extraordinarily difficult music. So the silence really helps with that, getting into that zone. You know, you can't be, and I have attempted this, playing Bach in a sweaty, smoke filled bar,
which is cool,
through an amplification system. It doesn't have the same effect as the blues guy that was on right before here or whatever. So I get that atmosphere, but at the same time, it's, one of those hurdles that everybody has to get over to get into it. And whenever you put something aesthetically in the way of enjoyment, aesthetic is the wrong word, just a hurdle to just going in and liking it, it always tends to push people off. You know, if it's already a high enough thing to get to, you know, it's like, all right, it's going to cost me this much money for a ticket to go through this concert. And wait, I have to be quiet if I think something's exciting. You know, it's like the complete opposite of what we're used to if we go to a sporting event or something when they're excited. Everybody gets really into it.
Yeah, I mean, the jazz world has that issue too, where you politely clap after a solo or something.
Yeah,
it's kind of a unfortunate side effect. You know, like
exactly.
It'd be cool if people were just like hip hop, hollering or whatever while you're playing, especially when you did that like real difficult passage or something. Especially in classical, right? Like a classical, it's so quiet, and if there's 3 movements, you're not supposed to clap like during any of the movements. So you could have just pulled off like the most amazing thing ever. And you hear some people coughing, but other than that, some chairs squeaking. Yep. But then you don't get any like response to whether it was good or not.
Exactly. And I mean, the worst scenario, the worst picture of that is watching a competition.
Oh yeah,
like the top of the top are out there busting their butt, playing enormously difficult set pieces and everything else, and it's just crickets till the half-hour set is done. Yeah. And then the crowd erupts, like usually, no matter what happens. I haven't seen it where they haven't been impressed. At that level, it's always just to kind of segue with that, like the thing that I've seen with most classical guitar competitions is that it goes into 2 ways. It's either there's a clear winner that's just head and shoulders above everybody that's there, or everybody else just lost, in the sense that like they were tired, they didn't play as expressively as the one guy, and they weren't bad players. They didn't
slip the $100 bill to the judge's pocket.
Yeah, exactly. Or something like that, where it's like one year, I think it was 2017 where I was watching it, and they're all still great players, but it was like 2016 when Xavier Zara won it. It was like, he was clearly like absolutely brilliant. It was unbelievable watching this kid do it. And he, there was a couple of flubbed notes, but seeing the level and the consistency of it, it was like, who cared? Okay, so these like 2/16 notes out of 5,000 that were going by, he missed. Oh, well, but the expressiveness and the control was just absolutely stunning. And then the next year, it was like, the players were really, really good, clearly better than me. So I'm not saying like I'm better than them in this judgment call, but there was just a lack of, wow, this guy's really, really good. And the guy that won played great, but the other guys just didn't have as difficult pieces for the last set and weren't, just kind of flat playing. Like one guy was clearly super quiet. Like I don't know what happened to his guitar, but compared to the other ones, he was like way, way, way quiet. And it might be just he's a quieter player, but the guy that won it was good, but it was like he wasn't head and shoulders above. It was everybody else would screwed up, in one way, which was disappointing because the one guy that I really wanted to win, like watching him go through the rounds, I was like, oh, this guy's got it. And you could just tell by the last round, he was wiped out. He was so tired with jet lag and all the competition stress or whichever. Yeah. He was just not putting it together, but clearly better than me, but that's the way that it goes. And
Yeah, we'll have to do an episode. So we're still figuring out how we're gonna do all this, but we'll have to do an episode on competition and just the thoughts on that. I
Yeah,
think.
well, maybe we could even like watch one, or watch like like watch a jazz one and a classical one, or jump around in them and just kind of.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to like. I think from your how excited you sound, like hearing you talk about it, you must be in favor of competitions in a sense. So just even getting into that whole like, are competitions good for music and blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, and I mean we can start right in on it now, but I'm generally in favor of the competitive edge just because it's a challenging thing,
Yeah,
and that's pretty much it. It's a matter of, okay, you can play it this well. Can you do it that it's one thing to go from the practice room to the recital hall. There's that step of like dedication that happens in the practice room when you're working on it, and then you get up in front and you're getting judged by your teacher, at least when you're in school, and the audience, and you play that, and you're judging yourself as you're playing. It's a whole different level. As somebody that's been in a couple of competitions, it's a
yeah,
totally different level to sit in front of one man or a couple of judges that are just like are going to put you to the next round. And then when you make that next round, when you make it to the finals and you walk out there on stage for the last bit, it's like the amount of pressure is unbelievable. And then
sure.
after that competition, recitals were whatever. These are easy. This is a breeze. I'm not, there's not a lot of money running on the end. If I misread a note, it's like,
Yeah, right.
it was totally more relaxed. So I don't know. I think in general that for like, that was the one thing that with my undergrad, well, and to an extent the graduate degree, that was always the contention among the students is like, why is he making us compete? Like, why would he make us do this?
Yeah, sure.
You didn't have a choice. If you were in the studios, he was like, you're going to compete. That's it. And I mean, for the first 2 years, I was like, well, this is just stand up in front of the firing squad, put a cigarette in my mouth, and I'm done.
Yeah,
That's
right.
it. And walked off the stage or out of the classroom or whatever. Um, so it was like, what was the point? And that got a lot of discussion going around the students there. It's like, why are we doing this? But, eventually, when I finally did make it to the final round, and this doesn't really relate to like, oh, I finally made it, so now I see the value. It was more of, it took a couple of years to get it through my thick skull that the amount of dedication and time that you put into learning those pieces for a competition, the focus is so different than anything else. Like I could probably sit down right now and write out all those competition pieces just from memory. And I mean,
Yeah, that's
there's
an
a
interesting side effect for sure.
that's one of the things that I think that Steve was pushing on with that is to be like, listen, these are you might not make it to the end, but that's not the point. The point is to get you dedicated and motivated to such an extent in your practice that routine and that dedication flows into everything else that you start to touch.
Yeah,
You know,
I could definitely see where it's valuable for the performer, just because it's hard to find a situation where you would be more nervous than a competition,
yeah,
and just learning how to deal with that side of it. In classical is funny that way, like we were just talking about the how specific to the piece you have to be. Like it adds an extra layer of protection or fear, I guess.
yeah, no,
I know, like I basically I've been playing shows for 25, 30 years, in general, like non-classical things that I've done, I don't really get nervous at this point. You get excited, and I don't necessarily think that I always do well, but like I'm pretty like into it, and I want to give the best performance I can. With classical though, something about it really brings out the nerves, and I don't think I get as nervous as I've seen some people get, who basically are like throwing up backstage or whatever, or literally can't move. Like they're just stuck. Um, but yeah, there's like you can't make a mistake in a way. Like you kind of have to. You're not just like playing it, or like at least I never got to the point where it just felt like I wasn't thinking and it just came out. It was always like, all right, this is the first A section or whatever. And now I'm gonna go like, oh crap, is that the coded? Like I never got. Maybe I didn't get good enough at it to like feel so comfortable. I was always thinking too much about the music. And that's I think I wonder now like if I would do that, because I think I've grown a lot since I was really playing classical. But anyway, the nerves are intense.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think it has to do with you're playing somebody else's music.
Yeah.
It's like there's no room for. Okay, I don't want to say there's no room for expression, but it's a different type of expression that comes out of it.
Yeah.
When you're sitting there and all the judges know exactly note for note what you're going to play, it's a totally different mindset than going out and improvising. And not that improvising is less than; it's just a different
Yeah,
feel.
you're in your it's a language you've created for yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I remember the first one that I was in, where I was in the finals. I was playing the fugue to the 998, and there's a decop or not. There's a cadence that's exactly the same for three different sections, and I was in AutoZone, like just kind of going, and I repeated a whole section,
Oh,
which
nice.
totally screwed up the amount of time because you only get, I think it was 25 minutes.
They like flash a light at you too, like
No, but they will stop you. They didn't. They were kind. They didn't do it this time. But I've seen in other competitions where they're like time, and just like that was it.
yeah.
And honestly, those guys that did get timed out still made it to the next round, but they went in there knowing that it's like, okay, I'm going to time out in the middle of this piece and whatever.
Yeah.
But I remember that was like the biggest epic. Like in my head, I was like, oh fudge, except I didn't say fudge, and it was just like, well, I can't like skip. Like,
Yeah,
what do
right.
you? It's like, nope, just go through the repeat, get the notes again, take the punch in the face, and move on. And that's exactly what I did. In that
Yeah, I mean, you
regard,
definitely have to just go on, right?
yeah. In that regard, that competition, it was just like that was one of the ones where, I mean, I came in second, but it wasn't because I was better than the third place. It was just third place ended up doing worse than I did.
Yeah.
I remember when they came backstage, they're like, I totally forgot this section. I'm like, well, I'll take the win. Yay.
I remember when I was a kid, like the PBS used to show the Tchaikovsky competitions for piano.
Oh, geez,
And
yeah.
my dad loved that stuff. And he'd be like, you're sitting there and you're watching, and like someone gets on stage, and probably in general, that's like, I mean, that's like the highest level of like piano players, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and they just don't play. Like they can't get the first note out, and they're sitting there, and just it's like it's a fascinating thing to watch because they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
You probably like you're like I want to be neighbors with that person because you're gonna hear just unreal stuff all the time. But yeah, then it's an interesting thing. I guess from my point of view, it's like I don't know that it helps music. It's like not what music's about, the competition, but I like that it sort of like sheds light on competition. So it's kind of like here's a place that it's popular enough that it gets enough eyes on it, where
Mhm.
otherwise, just playing at your local church or at the college or whatever, or weddings and all kinds of different places or bar, like most people just won't see it. They'll never know it's there. But if you can collect enough people and sort of put that competitive edge on it, all of a sudden like non-classical guitarists get interested in it, or non-classical pianists get interested in it. I mean,
I think that,
they're interested in the whole like psychology of like what it takes to be a performer like that,
yeah.
and it draws it. And then you can create fans that way, you know. So maybe like I know a lot of people are kind of like majorly against competitions,
Yeah.
but I think in general I'm cool with it because I mean anything that can help like bring music up into like regular people's life is better, I think it's a good thing.
And that's the same thing that I'm at with it. I mean, there's clearly people in the class that absolutely hated the idea, like
Yeah,
were
sure.
vehemently having to do it, and I get where they were coming from, but there's that old proverb of like, what's the difference between, and I'm not calling these people foolish by any stretch of the term, but there's a proverb, what's the difference between a wise man and a fool, and the answer is that a wise man can learn from anybody, and it's like when in regard to the music, it's like, yeah, I didn't like being forced to compete. Like I would have really liked to just, I'm sick, click,
Yeah.
God, off, but at the same time, after going through that, the value of it was clearly there, and you just take it and learn it, you know. And that's the other benefit with that too, is having a good teacher, which is a whole other subject and rabbit hole that we can go down.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have too many different teachers. It was basically Steve, Francois, and Jim. You know, before I went to school, I didn't have anything. Oh, and Pierre. I didn't have any formal training outside of like when I showed up to Pierre's door in France, you know.
Yeah, right. Pierre
and
who?
Ben Suzanne. Ben Susan. So yeah, I studied with him for a bit in his residential seminar.
Amazing player. If you're not familiar with that guy.
And that was one of the guys, like I was really into Hedges at the time, like Michael Hedges. And he, the guy that a friend of mine that was really instrumental in getting me into guitar, said like they were both playing at the same night, and he's like, go see Pierre instead of Michael. He's like, Michael always comes around, go see Pierre. He's from France, you know, it's every couple of years. It's like, all right, fine. And I didn't get what Pierre was doing. Like to the almost to the untrained ear, it's nice. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's nice. And Hedges had the visual factor of the tapping and the slapping and everything else. So it's a very aesthetically, visually drawing people in. So it's like, oh yeah, I got to see that. That's good. Like these extended techniques, the weird stuff. But once I actually studied Pierre's music, it was like, okay, this guy really knows what he's doing. Like really gets it underneath everything, and everything's written out. You know, there isn't a whimsical decision in anything that he writes, though he does improvise a lot when he's up on stage. You know, it's his tune, so he can do whatever the hell he wants.
You know, the first time I got introduced to him was actually through his book. I think my dad got it for me.
Oh yeah, the guitar.
Yeah, he has a book. You ever see it? You have it?
Yeah.
Okay. But it's funny, and I remember it because it has recipes in it.
Yep, at the end of it. Yep.
Yeah. I'm like, who's this guy? This is pretty awesome. You know, write a guitar book with like food recipes and stuff in it. And then I finally heard him, and he's amazing. And I've got to see him, I think, twice now. So
yeah, didn't we see him at Nighttown together?
Yeah, Nighttown in Cleveland. Yeah.
Yep. I think that was a show where he told the two people, it's like, if you keep talking, I'm going to stop playing.
I don't remember that.
Which I totally agree with. It was like, this. Why the hell are you here? You know, if you're going to sit table right in front of the dude and talk, that's just crazy.
So that place is actually going through owner changes right now. So
really?
We'll see what happens. Yeah, in our unfortunate COVID time. I'm not sure how related to it is to that. Like that's the chef or somebody's taking over. It's an interesting place in Cleveland. There's a jazz club, but they always have great music there. It's one of the best venues.
One of the top 50 jazz clubs in the nation or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's great. Except there's like everyone knows when you go there that there's a bar that's sort of like the local bar, I guess, where people were always talking like the entire time that a show's going on. So you went and you paid some money to go see a show, and there's people that didn't come to the show, but they're having like a birthday party over on the side, and they're like screaming and yelling, and you're seeing Kurt Rosenwinkel like 20 feet away from you, and they're being, it's kind of an annoying place in a way, but it's great because there's great music there, so it's like a catch, and it's not. There's even like posts and stuff in the way, and
yeah, you have to show up super early to get it like a good seat, you know, and a good angle at it if you're lucky enough to even do that, you know. And like, did you see Man Ring there too with me, or was that?
I don't think I've seen Man Ring actually.
Yeah, I've seen Man Ring there twice.
Michael Man Ring, if you're not familiar.
Yeah,
bass player, amazing.
Just disgustingly good. And
also play with Michael Hedges a bunch.
Yep. So it's a cool joint there. So have you been to any jazz competitions or anything like that, or know anything?
Have I ever done one? No. Actually, I don't think I've ever been to one.
Or seen one? Because I've seen a couple of videos.
Yeah, I know of them. Like there's the Thelonious Monk competition for sure. There's some other ones. You know, I haven't really kept track of it that much. I know one of our guys that's around here, Dan Wilson, was in it one year. I think it's the Monk competition. Every like 4 years, there's guitar there, and they kind of like rotate instruments every year.
Okay.
So I think it's like guitar, then piano, and then sax and trumpet. Maybe I don't actually know. Yeah, it's funny. Like the last time I knew a few of the people that were there. You know, like I knew them at least, like they were like Facebook friends or at least or whatever, or I've met a few of them. So it's kind of interesting to see. And the one guy that won this past one, Max Light, I actually saw him in Boston last time I was there playing with Noah Preminger, who's a
Oh,
sax
cool.
player who I know. Um, Great player. So it's kind of funny that I kind of met them when they were having dinner and stuff during the show. This really fancy place in Boston. I don't even remember the name of it.
Hmm.
But anyway, yeah. So I don't know too much about it. They usually have like it's kind of like the Guitar Center version too. Like what's the Guitar Center competition where they'll have like Satriani or whatever.
Yeah.
So at the guitar one for the Monk one, they'll have people like Pat Metheny, I think, was there, and John Scofield. You know, it's like big name jazz guitar players are the judges, which is pretty cool. You know, so you
Yeah.
get to meet and see that. And I guess that's actually classical guitar competitions aren't usually like big name performers as judges, are they? They're you like
Not to
certified
the,
judges or something.
well, I mean, most of them are academic in the sense that, like, you got your college professors that are there in terms of
You
classical.
have to go like to be a GFA judge. There's the Guitar Foundation of America. It's kind of the biggest classical guitar competition ever. If you get a chance, go.
Yeah,
Um,
that
and
we
that's the
did.
one that Adam's been talking about too. When he was talking about the big guitar competitions earlier, and the
Not the
people
one
that
that I
are.
got the finals, but yes. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I wonder like so the judges there. Do they have to get like certified to be judges, or are they just random professors, or like how do you get to be a judge on that?
I don't think it's a certification. I think it's a matter of professorship and knowing. Because I mean, in one sense, the classical guitar community is pretty small relative to its thing. So
Yeah,
anybody that's above average is generally known. Like everybody, it's just like, oh yeah, I know this guy who plays this concert and so on. And
yeah,
you invite your friends, and since you live in that world, it's just kind of it. It's a weird nepotistic friendship
no, yeah,
conglomeration, boundary crossing thing, whatever. And there's good reason for that, because there's not, like, it's not a Guitar Center type of initiation where you just kind of walk in and everything's up on the walls. Like, it takes a lot. It's a big barrier of entry to get to a level where you can aesthetically judge. I'm using that word like crazy, where you can judge classical music with a good ear and know what's going on.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I guess it's just friends of friends.
to an extent. I mean, at
Yeah.
the Oberlin one, I know Steve was. I think Steve was judging. He was hosting, so I don't know if he
I
was
don't
judging.
think he was judging. Not that I
But
remember.
solo duo, like, well, it wasn't solo duo at the time. I don't think they joined up till after that competition. But Lorenzo McKelly was there, and I think he was judging. Rafaela Smits, Stanley Yates. Um, we do have the internet at our fingertips, so we can look. But like, everybody that was judging
Yeah.
had clout. It wasn't like random person that
Right.
got their degree and they were judging that. And I think every judge also gave a concert as
Interesting.
well.
Yeah, maybe.
There might be a couple that were just judges because they need like an odd number. And the way that
So
they
so
do,
you might end up with like the who's who of jazz or of classical guitar.
yeah, I don't think David Russell shows up like just to judge.
Yeah, you're
Like,
not gonna see Sharon Isbin and David Russell
yeah,
doing it, right?
exactly.
I was just thinking like we're doing this podcast and the names that are being dropped, like you really need to know some classical people. But it's good. Maybe in our description, we'll try to like list the names in the description. So if
Yeah,
you're
and
curious
like,
about these people, you should really look them up. Like we're talking about some of the world class people that if you're in the classical world, you'll be like, oh yeah, that I know that person.
yeah.
But I'm imagining like a lot of jazz people that are probably listening. They probably don't even know who Sharon Isbin is,
Hmm.
or and that's about as big of a name, or David Russell
Yeah.
as there is in classical guitar, aside from Segovia,
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
or John Williams, the other John Williams.
Yeah, one of the three that are famous now.
Yeah, the other John Williams. All people worth checking out. Just unbelievable musicians.
So, to kind of keep the focus on the competition aspect, but to shift it into the jazz realm, like, I've seen electric guitar competitions,
Yeah,
and they're generally mostly shred fests. Let's just, to an extent, and that's a viable thing. It's like I can
sure.
kind of make it, but I'm not that level of it, because that's what they focused on. But it ends in the sense of, in the classical world, we know the piece. Like, nobody's going to go up there and be like, this is this, and it's made up. Though I will say that one guy did do that, Jeremy Collins, played an original piece in a competition final, which a professor at the time was saying, like I overheard him saying, he's like, I can't stand judging original pieces in a final competition, because he's like, now I have an extra thing to factor in. It's like, how is their writing? You know,
Yeah, right.
technical hard, but it could be an awful piece. So you're stuck with like this whole big thing of, okay, the kid can obviously play Mertz and he can play Bach and he can play like that modern piece that whoever the hell they commissioned to do it for that competition can handle it. And now I have this original thing that I have to judge on top of that and see where I would put him with that.
Yeah.
You know, so I get that thing, but with like the electrical guitar thing, it's like nobody's doing a cover song. Like they don't go out there and there's not like a set piece to an extent. At least,
Well, so yeah, I think the way they will have certain pieces. They'll
okay.
say, play this standard or this standard, but it's kind of in your way. And then there's a bit of like stylistic things too. Like maybe you're gonna do a slow swing piece. Maybe you're gonna do a blues. Maybe you're gonna do like a Latin piece or something, or maybe some kind of world piece. So trying to get different aspects of your playing in there. Yeah, I think what you're getting at is like, hey, how do you judge that?
Exactly, because it's just so much more open than the classical
Yeah, I would
world.
think like, so imagine like a figure skating at the Olympics, right? Like it's
Okay.
all judged, and they're not like preset performances. And I think you don't even have to say what style of music or anything it is. It can be anything. So
Mhm.
it's coming from that same sort of place, I think, where it's like, what's your creativity? How's your performance? Did you nail the things you went for? I mean, for the most part, there's not a lot of like new techniques or something. So if you were doing that, did you nail that technique perhaps, or is like your maybe you like nailed the whole performance, but was it flat? Like did you give it the energy, or maybe you didn't nail every part of it, but like your energy was so good, like everybody, it didn't even matter if
Yeah.
there was mistakes, so-called mistakes in it, because the energy was good. So yeah, I think there's no there's probably less like qualitative judgment or something. You can't just say, is it qualitative? I think it's where you can't say how many points for technique. Did you play the B minor 7 arpeggio correctly? You can't. You're not gonna have those criteria. So it's way more just an impression you get from somebody.
Okay. Because I think that what's his name, Fyodor something crazy Russian, the last winner of
Hmm.
one, not the last one, but there was a recent one pre-COVID that he won, and I actually was turned on to him before the competition. Like
Yeah,
I think he might have sent me some of his tracks.
maybe.
Uh, maybe. Now I got to look it up. Let's see here if I can.
Do 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 do.
I need my other glasses. Yeah, Fyodor Dawson. I'll spell it Feodor, Fyodor. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if you ever hear this. And Dosumov, Dosumov. He won like some European jazz competition.
Uh-huh.
And he had like a couple of singles out that I thought it was you, but somebody turned me on to the kid
Yeah.
because he was like a kid, like 18, 19 years old. And I was like, now that's cool. And I noticed when I watched the competition that he won, it was clearly all improvising. Like these guys had, like, there was a standard tune and then there was a big
Yeah.
thing and their small band, it was just not even a quartet.
Like a
Why am I
trio.
drawing? Just drums, bass, and guitar.
Yeah, trio. Yeah.
Trio. Thank you. Good
Yeah.
God, I couldn't wait.
Classical guitarist.
Yeah, if it doesn't show. The thing with the three people, musicians together, trio. That's it.
You need to play with more people.
Yeah, exactly. It's but just watching that, it's like in that case, like it kind of tied into what I was saying. He was clearly head and shoulders above the other
Yeah.
players. Like he had the energy. He definitely was, in my opinion, with that, just from what I could hear, it's like he really was playing outside in a very tasteful way. It
Yeah.
wasn't just randomness to it. It was like intentional, and he always landed on his feet with it. And then the what was it? The other guys were good, but definitely totally more reserved than this kid.
Oh, interesting.
It was just like they were much more in with their soloing, like very harmonically correct, quote
Right.
unquote. And not that their licks weren't difficult or anything, but this other kid was just like breaking that mold at such the right points that it was like, all right, that's cool. If I would have
Yeah.
taken the win, it would have been him.
Yeah, I mean, I
Whether or
guess
not,
if you ever listen to my playing, I'm always going for it. So I appreciate the people that go for it.
yeah,
I know when I was
good.
playing in Nashville, there was some great. I mean, it's like there's like every guitar player is great there. You know, they like the thing in Nashville. It's like the gas. The person pouring your gas is the best guitar player you've ever met in your life, kind of thing, right? Really, there's so many. But what I noticed is it's so like perfect. Like it was always just right. It was always the right note choices, very tasteful, and all these kind of things. But like it sort of lacks something, you know. I feel like my favorite jazz musicians and why I'm drawn to it, John Coltrane or something, like there's an energy and like there's a I'm gonna try something I've literally never tried before because I'm going to, and I don't know that I'm gonna land it. I think this is gonna work, and I'm actually not totally sure it's gonna work, but I'm gonna try anyway. And there's that sort of like going for it thing that is, to me, it's like it's very like real life. It's like the thing, the artist side of me that I really like about it. Like you're really putting it out there, like I,
Mhm.
you know, and that's the sort of thing that the reason I've sort of got away from certain other forms of guitar playing that are improvisatorio, improv
Improvisational. There it is.
improvisational, yeah, is that a lot of times people just play really like always safely.
Mhm.
And now what you'll find too is fans of jazz seem to be like some of like maybe half, I don't know, really like the people that just play the right notes at the right time and like do it in the right way. And then there's the other side that like the people that kind of go for it. So you have to sort of find your niche there, I guess.
Yeah.
It's interesting you said that when you said that he was clearly the winner, and it sounds like he won that competition. Um, Depending on who the judges were,
Yeah.
some judges
Exactly.
would have said, "Yeah, but like he didn't nail that thing or whatever," and they nobody here made any clear mistakes or something, and they would say the other person played safer, more tasteful, or something. And then yeah, that's kind of interesting to think about. Um, I guess the reasons why I like jazz is because it seems like real life. It's like you're putting it all out there. You might fall apart. You might have a great gig where everything goes right, and but that doesn't generally happen. It's usually just like life. Like you have a pretty good day, even though you spilled coffee on yourself in the morning, and you know you stepped in a mud puddle. But like overall, the day was pretty good, and yeah, you got in a little bit of fight, but then you had a nice compliment about something, or you did something, you finished some task that you didn't really think was possible earlier, and it's very much like that. That's like you're wearing it on your sleeve.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. Yeah, interesting about competitions. I guess that's the side of the competition I don't like. Is like I don't always necessarily agree with the judging too.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's part of it. And I think that, but ultimately, I think the thing that why the competitions are there is people like to see people's ability on the edge of collapse.
yeah,
Like,
maybe.
like, how good are you? Like, how much can you push yourself and still maintain it
Right.
without just completely falling apart? It's like, well, the one that we were at together in
Yeah.
Oberlin, uh, the one girl that was in the finals. There was four finalists, and she came in third. But like during her set, she went to retune and did not retune the guitar. It was
All
like,
right.
oops, made it worse, type of thing. It was
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
it was like everybody on it was like, oh, hon, just please, just nope, nope, no.
That reminds me, like a lot of people tune the guitar, on the seventh and the fifth and seventh fret, but
Yeah,
like that's like don't do that.
yeah, exactly. That
Because
is
your guitar will not be in tune in the end because of where the harmonics lie and they're not quite perfect and all these kind of things. But you see a lot in classical guitar because it's kind of easier to hear, especially if it's kind of noisy or whatever. They'll use the harmonics,
Well,
and then
I
it's
don't
like
even
when they play a chord, you're like, oh no, it's going
get in
downhill.
their case. It was clearly staged, right? Like, not
Yeah.
that she was faking or anything,
Oh,
but
sure.
it was just like, it was clear that, and she still came in third, out
Yeah.
of, so that didn't kill her playing. And like, that was one of the things where, the guy that came in fourth was like, what the hell? She was clear. You could just tell on his face, when they did that, he was like, really? But then, you just walking around through the crowd, I heard somebody say, well, she was playing harder pieces. Like, and she nailed the notes. She was just out of tune, where the other guy was playing like something that was more accessible and played it great, but it was easier.
Yeah.
So there was that marked, like, they knew what was harder than the other. And that was one of the things that kind of factored into, okay, we'll ignore the tuning mishap and look at the technical aspect of it, which in one sense, I kind of agree with that decision. Playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and not that it was that simple, but playing Mary Had a Little Lamb in tune versus, a Satriani tune slightly out. I'm going to go with the guy that playing the Satch tune is a little bit trickier with that, or whatever,
Yeah, it's interesting to think about.
So, that is just that. So, I don't know. To sum up where I'm at with competitions, clearly I think they're a good thing. I don't think anybody should be necessarily forced to it, but like, as somebody that's now in the Steve's position of teaching at a collegiate level,
Steve
sometimes,
who? Steve who?
Steve Aaron. So that's the wonderful maestro himself, and Jim Marin, and and Francois, the three guys that I took formal lessons under. Sitting on the other side of that chair, or the other side of that office, it's I can see why they would do it, because you can really, you got to motivate students somehow. Like, sometimes you'll have these talented kids come in and they're just like pissing away their ability because they're not taking it seriously. And you're just kind of like, I'm getting paid. I'm going to get paid either way. But if you gave a darn about these kids and how they're doing, you're going to push them. And you got to figure out a way to keep them all at the same motivational level through that. Like, this last semester, I had this one kid that came in and he was doing some pretty interesting figure style stuff. And, that my rule is everybody learns to play in the first position, at least to read music. Because I get, wide variety. Kids that have read music before, kids that have never touched the guitar, whatever. Everybody gets the same thing. And I'm sitting here for the first 4 weeks and he's barely off of the first 3 strings, like barely reading. And I'm like, what's that? And I have another kid that never played guitar before in his life, and he's already through all the 6 of the strings in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
And so, as a teacher, I'm sitting there looking at both examples and I'm like, okay, what do I do to kick this one kid's butt into gear without destroying his motivation, and set it so that he can actually pull off what he can pull off? So I basically, like, one day I must have been in a sour mood because I was just not having it. He sat down to play, and it's literally 3 strings. So it's quarter notes on 3 strings or something. Right. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh, all right, I'm not going to sit here for the hour and waste my time with this. I got other things I got to work on. It's basically what was going through my head. I'm like, holy cow, I get where all my teachers were coming from at times. So I was like, I stopped him and I'm like, dude, listen, you came in, you were doing this finger style thing, with all this elaborate work for where you're at, and you nailed that. And I'm having you play 3 strings, a total of 6 notes, and you can't do it. And I'm like, I have people that have never played guitar before that are ahead of you right now. You can do better. I expect you to do better. And I'll see you in a week. And I ended the lesson. It worked. It totally worked. I said one other thing. I'm like, listen, the only thing that this is showing me is that you're just not putting the time in. That's it.
Yeah.
Looking at your ability to where you're at right now, you're just not doing it. And that's stupid. And you're wasting both of our time. So I said that all to him. And then within the next week, it was like, boom, he was on it. And then within 2 weeks, he had all the strings done and was set. And by the end of the semester, he was playing The Naked Stalk by Michael Hedges. So, he did it great, like an absolutely fantastic. I love to see that. That's one of the things why I keep teaching, is to see that, like, turnaround once the click goes off in the head. It's like, boom, there it is. Awesome. Excellent. And he did an absolutely great job with that. And it was really cool to see. and do that. And he was appreciative after the fact.
Right.
I could definitely tell that it was the dog tail between the legs, and kind of like, okay, whatever the first week. But when he came back and nailing it, and that to me, like, that's why I valued Steve's input, and Jim's and everybody's input, is because they weren't like bull crapping you. They weren't just blowing smoke.
Oh yeah, that's
If it was
nice.
lousy, it would be like, that was terrible.
Oh
They're
yeah,
not
it's the worst when, like, if you're anyone who's decently motivated as a guitar player or any instrument, I'm sure you get those teachers sometimes that they're just so happy to have a student that's like pretty good
yeah,
instead of a beginner, and they'll just kind of kiss your butt in a way, right? They're just kind of like, hey, it sounds good to me, like,
yeah.
what am I paying you,
No, exactly. But that's exactly
you
the
kind of need, like, I always appreciate when the teacher's just like, man, I don't know what the hell you were thinking there. That was horrible. And you're
yep.
thinking like, I just worked so hard on this, and they kind of put you in your place. But you kind of need those lessons. They're like, I guess it's good to be nice, but it's not very helpful in a lot of ways too.
Well,
Especially if you're
exactly.
really trying to get better.
Well, if your goal is to get to a certain destination in your playing, whether it's a skill level or a piece or just an understanding of music, and nobody tells you where you are, you
Yeah.
have no idea how to get to the other place. Like, you're just floating in the ether. It's I've seen it too many times, and I've taken over for other teachers at other places. Whether it's like a music school or not so much with college, because general, at least where I'm at now, it's like I don't want to say I built the program, but the program is like, I'm the one that's heading up that classical era.
Yeah, right.
It's a different thing. So it's like, you look at this. I'd sit down with other students, and I'm like, this guy took your money? Like, he's not doing anything for you.
Yeah, sure.
It absolutely boggles my mind. And I think, and that's maybe that's a subject we can talk about another time, is a matter of, like, when you're making money teaching, how do you continue to eat but yet be demanding of your students at the same time? And how do you pick when to push, when to not?
Well, I think, yeah, without getting into it, it's a long game, right? You gotta.
Yeah,
Be
it
tough.
is a long game. You got to get the
I
reputation.
don't teach much anymore, so there's a lot of
Man,
reasons for that. We can get into that too.
exactly. Well, let's save that for another episode. I
Yeah,
think
right.
that's a topic, because we both have
I,
wildly differing thoughts.
oh yeah,
So,
I did want to mention too, like, yeah, you're talking about learning the notes. That's one of my hugest pet peeves. When people say they can't learn the notes, or like, how do I learn the notes? I think about like Jaco Pastorius,
yeah,
famous bass player. Like, there's a story about him like wanting to play bass, and his dad was a musician, but his dad would leave for like, I think he was a musician. He would leave for like a week for work or whatever. And when Jocko got the bass, he was like, when I get back the end of this week, you better know every damn note on that bass, or you're gonna get a whooping, basically. you know.
mhm.
And guess what? Who knew the notes at the end of the week was Jocko, right? Like, he knew all the notes on the entire fretboard well by the end of the
Yep.
week, and he didn't even know, presumably didn't know anything about the instrument, right? So he had to learn and figure out how to do it. So I always think about that. And I'm like, well, if you really had to do it, if there was a gun against your head or whatever, you would figure out a way to learn all the notes on the fretboard, and it wouldn't even take you that long.
Yeah,
You would
exactly.
do it in a week, and it would stink. It would be It would be tedious work. That's the problem. It's really tedious.
Mhm.
You've got to keep testing yourself. You got to come up with your own ways to do it. You have to. The only person that knows the truth is you too. So if you have some weird, like, well, I know this is an A, so then this is an A, and then this is, like, those kind of things don't really help you, I think, in the long run. Maybe this to start, but at some point you just have to memorize the location of that note.
Mhm.
And yeah, so then I have I really just don't have a lot of sympathy for it, and that's probably why I don't teach.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, though. It's, in one sense, it's the musical language. You
Yeah,
take the time to learn, like, it's 7 letters, 7.
right.
And I feel like my temperature rising because that speech from that other
Yeah, right.
kid. It's like, it's 7 notes. Like, that's it. Yeah, it looks complicated, but guess what? It's just 7 letters.
Yeah.
The
Well, I know.
ABC.
I don't know if you saw, but it was like a year or two ago. I made a video with my daughter with, like,
River.
yeah, with River. teaching her to play. The first lesson, I showed her some piano stuff. We don't force any music at our house or whatever. So if the kids get interested, we kind of show them stuff. So she said she was interested, and she wanted to learn some guitar, and she wanted to make a video. She just was, the kids see YouTube videos, and they're like, I want to be in a YouTube video. I'm like, sure, let's do a first lesson thing, and we'll put it on video, and it's like 25 minutes. But I show her how to figure out where the notes are on the fretboard and a couple little songs, in a couple other like guitar things, like this is the strings, these are the names of the strings. I think we even made up our to show that you can make up your own names for each string. Like every assistant does good, whatever. We came up with whatever it was at the time. I think in the video. But my point is that I showed her how to figure out where the notes were. And in like 25 minutes, she basically knew how to figure out where all the notes were on the entire fretboard. And this was a 8-year-old who's, she's part me, so she can't be that smart. I think she's smart. No, but so a lot of it was just like kind of just giving her the tool to say, here's how you could figure out how to do it. And she really could. And I thought that's interesting. So it's like it only took really like 10, 15 minutes to sort of just give her a little bit of background. And then she was able to deduce how to figure out where they were. And if she actually had practiced it at all, she would have, I think she really would have had it in like a week where she could have got to anything without like the Jocko, like gun to their head, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But like it was just a matter of she just needed to shed it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, so then I saw that. So it's like I've seen that enough times because I used to teach a lot where you'd show somebody something and they'd figure it out. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic. We may be already bumping into our time here.
Yeah, I think we probably are. We got like an hour and 19 minutes.
Yeah.
So
cool.
I think it's roughly about a half hour of jibber jabber before like we officially got started.
That's okay. I think it's good.
We can edit it down either way.
Yeah, so, I said we don't really know what we're doing yet. I think. I guess I'm a fan. I'm the improviser, so let's just put it out there. But
have an outline.
Of course, subscribe to our YouTube stuff.
Oh yeah,
subscribe. I can't remember what is it called in the podcast world.
Podcast.
I guess you subscribe to the podcast.
Yeah.
Leave us some feedback. We'll see it on YouTube. I don't know how you see it on some of the other formats. We're still learning.
I think it's like the rating thing. When they rate it, they can comment on it or something.
Yeah, we try to do this, I think, as much as we can, like weekly or whatever.
The goal is weekly.
Weekly, and then eventually maybe we'll get into interviews and all kinds of other stuff. We know a lot of people. There's plenty of stuff to talk about. We didn't even get into the fact that NAMM is basically not happening, or it's virtual.
Oh, yeah,
we have so many topics that we could get into. Anyway, I guess we'll call it. You want to call it?
Yeah, I think we should. Otherwise, we're just going to keep rambling.
We'll just keep. All right, on to next week. Thanks for joining us at Wood, Air, Metal Guitar Podcast.
Which I already stopped the recording.
Wham!
We really got to do that, huh?